All right. Hello, everyone. Today we'll be talking about growth metrics for startups. Running a startup, it's good to understand the direction of your business, what is working, what is not working, and being able to track the metrics that are giving you the results that will help you grow and will help you scale is very, very important. You don't want to spend your time tracking vanity metrics that's not going to add any growth to your company. That is why today we'll be looking at those core metrics that every startup should focus on to help them scale and to help them grow. For today's workshop, I'm honored to have in our midst our CEO and CFO, Niko, who I consider as a big role model and expert in this field. Some of you will be wondering, why should you trust whatever you're going to be hearing today? Well, I'm going to give you a lot of reasons for that. First, Niko has been a SaaS CFO for a lot of financial tech companies. He has over 20 years plus experience in accounting and financing. He's been a finance director in Luxembourg and Geneva. He's a financial advisor in over 10 countries and with 5 years plus experience in accounting service industry. So he has seen it all. Today also, we are having this workshop in collaboration with one of our partners, Startup Lithuania. Actually, this workshop wouldn't have been possible without their help. So today I would like to bring to the stage Eva to make a quick intro about Startup Lithuania, about the partnership we have with them, and about herself in general.
So hi everyone, I'm Eva. I'm Events and Pre-Accelerator Manager at Startup Lithuania. And as you can see from the slide, we are the governmental institution and we foster and facilitate the startup ecosystem in Lithuania. And we're very happy that, through partnerships with some amazing ecosystem members like Calqulate here, we can help entrepreneurs to really, increase their knowledge and skills and to scale their businesses to hopefully become a startup unicorn one day. So actually how we saw the need for this topic, it comes from our experience personally dealing with startups ourselves, because when you don't have a concrete business model or things, very determined, then it's really easy to lose track and get, off track. So it's very important to know what kind of metrics you should track. So I think today Calqulate right here is the perfect guys to talk about that. Not only because they're specialists in the field, but also because they're a startup themselves. So a big thank you to Calqulate for the partnership and to enabling our community to learn about the metrics. And I wish you a great event. And, if you have any questions for us, then you can always email us.
With that being said, I would like to invite Niko to the stage to take over from here. Hi, Niko, are you there?
Hi, Kelvin. Yes, I'm here. And let's get started with growth metrics. And so a couple of things before we start. We're going to start with Chopsticks. And one might wonder, why are we talking about Chopsticks here? How do they relate to financial analytics and KPIs? But there's a simple solution or simple reason for that, then we can go to the next slide to explain a little bit more. So chopsticks, so you can utilize them in food and cooking, for example, but it's good to understand the concept of chopsticks, basically to understand financial data as well, because you are going to need a pair of chopsticks to pull insight from your financial data here, and they best work in pairs. And if you can, Kelvin, go to the next slide. So we are going to look at a couple of concepts here. So like chopsticks, KPIs are pretty useless on their own as individual numbers, but basically you should always look at them in pairs or in a sequence or in multiple, so they become much more useful. And looking at one KPI in isolation is quite a dangerous practice. Kelvin mentioned the vanity metrics a little bit earlier, and that is really the case when you're looking at KPIs in isolation. So, customer acquisition costs or lifetime value or something like that, it doesn't really tell you much if you're looking at it on its own. But when you're comparing it with other relevant metrics, and especially several of them, you can understand your financial health and your growth potential much better here. And let's go to the next slide. And then this diagram basically explains that concept a little bit more. So here we have a number of different KPIs in one place, and they all link to one another. And if you're looking at only one of them individually, it doesn't really tell you much. But when you look at, for example, LTV to CAC in a pair, so lifetime value to customer acquisition costs, it actually starts telling you quite a lot of things. And then when you think about acquiring a new customer and then getting the customer using your service and making the customer love your service and then stick around for a long period of time, you need to take into account onboarding costs as well, in addition to your customer acquisition costs. So that would basically be the total costs of acquiring and onboarding the customer and making the customer stay for a long time. And then when you think about the volume of how many customers you acquired and onboarded, that you get the unit cost for those customers. And if we go to the left side of the same diagram, we get to the revenue side of things. And then here you have the total lifetime value of a customer. So all the cash flows, revenue that the customer is going to bring you during the lifetime of the relationship. And then billing frequency is a really important concept here. So the longer billing cycles you have, for example, like an annual or 2 years of billing at one go, usually the higher your LTV is, and you have also positive net revenue retention. And then you should look at all of these as a concept, as a whole, when you're looking at your KPIs. And you can make quite a lot of pairs here and link these to other metrics. So that's it. Basically, I wanted to give you a big concept of looking at KPIs as a bunch of them and comparing them against one another. So one might ask, okay, where do growth metrics come from? What is the source for growth metrics, and how should I calculate them? So here we have a couple of examples of first, like, where do they come from, and then in following slides, how to calculate them here. And basically your finance stack is the key thing of getting your growth metrics calculated and getting the granular financial data to actually pull insights from. And your finance stack is a set of all your financial software that you're using to run your operations. For example, the accounting software, the subscription management and payment software, payroll software, and the CRM software. You could think of other solutions here as like marketing data and open banking data, but these four are usually the key concepts of the finance stack here. And from the accounting software, you can get profitability analysis like EBITDA, gross margin, cash flow statements. You can capture from your subscription management software your SaaS metrics, your MRR data, your churn data, LTV, etc. Payroll data, from payroll software, you can capture your cash flow data, your CAC data, and HR analytics. And from the CRM software, you can basically get a lot of sales analytics, utilizing sales forecasting, calculate your sales cycle, etc. And the key thing here is that you combine all these data in one place. So you can basically compare your income and your expenses together, even on a customer level. And then you can utilize a lot of this data to actually forecast your growth metrics and understand them much better. So you can basically create one single source of truth when you combine all the data coming from your finance stack. Let's look at the next slide then. And this is the kind of old finance stack that a lot of companies are still utilizing. They are utilizing individual apps, some desktop apps, some cloud software apps, but they might not communicate with one another. So data doesn't really move automatically through integrations from one software to the other. For example, your payroll software to the accounting software, or from your bank to your accounting software, etc. And a lot of that reporting now is actually done in Excel in very manual, high-level format, which is prone to errors. It's really difficult to share. For example, it takes a lot of time, and usually you're looking at numbers that are 3 weeks older or something like that. And this is quite a inefficient way of doing creating growth metrics and financial reporting and forecasting. And in the next slide, we have our proposition of how to create a modern finance stack. You can basically change the software to something else here, but I would love to see the same kind of stack with the same kind of interconnectivity for every single startup here. So subscription management software, for example, we recommend, or we see a lot of companies using Stripe, for example. It has really good API. You can connect it to any software. Lots of our American customers are using Gusto for payroll. Again, it connects to almost any software and automates financial data collection. QuickBooks is a really good accounting software. HubSpot, for example, CRM software. And then Calqulate is basically the key thing in the middle of the finance stack that collects all that financial data into one place, but also ensuring that the data kind of flows from one software to the other as well around Calqulate as well, not just to Calqulate, but also from one software to another. And the interconnectivity is really key when you're building out your finance stack. That's one of the most important things, that you can basically access that data, but then you don't have to manually update data when you're running your financial processes. You can just lean back and let APIs do their thing over there. So let's look at the 5 most important metrics, growth metrics and financial health metrics for a growing business. Here, growing business, I'm thinking mostly about a startup, a digitally operating company, and it can be various types of revenue models. We've utilized MRR here, so this might be most suitable for a SaaS company, but all the rest are for suitable for other types of companies as well. One of the most important metrics is CAC, so customer acquisition costs. Here I'm going to talk about on a high level first, and then in later slides I'll tell you how to calculate all of this. So CAC tells you how much money you're spending on acquiring one new customer, and that really tells you like how much money can you also spend, and how much money should you spend on acquiring a new customer when you compare it to other KPIs like LTV. Again, think about them in pairs. ARPA, so average revenue per account, is the second important metric here. So either you can think about it as ARPA, so average revenue per account, or ARPU, so average revenue per user. Depends on your revenue model, but it really tells you the average revenue you generate from your customers. And here it's really important to think about segments. So think, how could you actually divide your customer base into smaller segments, like, okay, your American customers versus your German customers, or customers buying product 1 versus product 2, or small customers versus big customers, etc. And then calculate ARPA separately for all of them, and think about it in a trend line. If you started billing 3 years ago, think about how the ARPA evolved over time, especially your new customers versus your current old customers. So that's really good potential for segment analysis. A third one is MRR. Monthly recurring revenue is really the lifeline of any SaaS company, and it brings a lot of forecastability in your KPIs. It brings a lot of like analytics there. It's really the most important thing that you can measure for a SaaS company. And it's basically the revenue that you can count on getting every single month here. And the longer billing cycle you have, the better. If you now bill your customers on a monthly basis, think about billing them on a quarterly basis or annual basis, so that you can ensure you can lock in more of that revenue in, and you get the money in as quickly as possible. We can go to the next slide here and look at the two last metrics over here. So let's talk about churn a little bit. Churn is really a measure of customer quality, but it's also a measure of your software quality as well. I basically would like to talk about ICP here, so ideal customer profile. If you're selling your service to the right kind of customers, and then you have the solution that solves their pain, they don't want to leave. Basically, if you have a bug-free solution that really works and solves your customers' pain, and you know who your customers are, what kind of pain points they have, churn should be quite low. But if you're selling your software to the wrong kind of customers or the wrong kind of ICP, then your churn might be much higher, because they start using your service and they are like, okay, this is not for me, they're going to leave. So it's at the same time customer quality and software quality as well. They need to love your product, basically. So simple question, are you developing the right kind of business relationships here? And churn measures that the amount of customers who left your company and the amount of revenue that was lost because of that. The last one here is LTV, so lifetime value. And then it basically tells you how much money your customers are bringing in during the lifetime of the customer relationship. And this is perfectly comparable to CAC, so customer acquisition costs. And then LTV should be minimum 3 times your CAC in order for it to be healthy. So let's talk about CAC a little bit more in detail. So it basically, how to calculate CAC. First, you need to take the total costs of your sales and marketing expenses, including your staff costs. So including all the, your sales staff, your marketing staff, and all the people that are doing some kind of customer acquisition. And it can also be partial work. So for example, I'm a CEO. I'm doing a little bit of sales work. I allocate about 20% of my salary to CAC, and it can be somewhere between 0 and 100%. But what we noticed, or actually one of the question was like, what is a good CAC? Is a low CAC good? Is a high CAC good? And so on. It's actually, looking at CAC alone, it doesn't tell you much. So I can't really tell you whether a low CAC or a high CAC would be good. I would say that compare it to your LTV, and then you see whether it's healthy or not. So for example, if your CAC is 1,000, then and your LTV is 4,000, then your LTV is 4 times higher than your CAC. That is a really good thing. So it really depends what kind of customers you're going after, how much you're expecting to get money out of them, how much they pay in advance, for example, and then you see the healthiness of the health of your CAC. And when you calculate CAC, you should always think about how quickly is that CAC paid back. And so if you bill annually, probably most of those customer acquisition costs that you've invested in sales efforts and marketing efforts are actually paid back, because the customer pays 1 year in advance. And then if they commit to a year, you're able to convince the customer during the first year, and they most likely then commit to another year as well. So that drives your LTV higher as well. So you need to think about these as a sequence, really. And how to calculate the customer acquisition cost per customer is that you take your total sales and marketing expenses for a single period, and then you divide it by the number of new customers that you managed to acquire during the same period. So for example, if your total CAC is 10,000 in 1 month and you added 10 new customers, then your CAC per new customer is 1,000. It's that easy, really. If your sales cycles are longer than a month, then I would advise you to look at the longer period of time, for example, 2 months or 3 months. So then you get more of a periodical view to that as well. And some companies are only getting a couple of new customers a year, but they are like worth millions. So then it basically would make more sense to look at it for a longer period of time as well. But always look at this in pairs with LTV and CAC payback time here. Let's go to the next one. And ARPA, so average revenue per account. This is really important to see in a trend line. For example, the monthly evolution of the average revenue. For example, how did it start in January, February, March, and so on? Is the curve upwards? What does it doing? How is it performing in different segments, in different markets, in different customer groups, etc. And then how is your account expansion doing, your upgrades and downgrades, for example. And when you actually, ARPA is used in several other KPI calculations, for example, in LTV calculations. So it's really important to be accurate about your ARPA calculations so that you can be accurate in other calculations as well that come after that. And ARPA is, for example, used in CAC payback time calculation. So how quickly does your customer pay back the CAC that you invested in acquiring them? So ARPA is simply calculated by taking your total monthly recurring revenue. So let's say you have 100,000 monthly recurring revenue, and you divide it by the active number of active customers. Here's for example, if you have 100 active customers, 100,000 MRR, your ARPA is 1,000. And then the more you can break it down to different segments, the better, really, so that other KPI calculations are more accurate. Let's go to the third one here. So monthly recurring revenue. So this is really the key thing to forecast and analyze here. So you can use it in sales forecasting, in revenue forecasting, and cash flow forecasting. And monthly recurring revenue is simply the total amount of all your subscriptions. So you might have subscriptions of various different euro values, dollar values, etc. And you calculate the monthly amount total, then you get your total MRR. And then when you estimate or forecast your billing frequency, for example, monthly or annually, then you can use this very easily in cash flow forecasting as well, and sales forecasting as well. Let's go to the fourth one over here. So after MRR, we're going to talk about churn. Here we've mentioned churn a couple of times. So for example, you can think about it from a customer churn point of view or a revenue churn point of view. So if customers are leaving, then you calculate a customer churn rate, but it might be a different thing than your revenue churn rate. So let's look at the calculation of these two things. So customer churn rate is calculated by using two different elements. So you take the total of your churn customers for a period, like a month, for example, and you divide it by the total customer number at the start of the period. For example, if you had 100 customers in the beginning of the period and one of them left, then your churn is 1%. And the same thing is used for revenue churn calculations as well. For example, if let's say your starting MRR was 100,000 and then you lost 1,000 euros of revenue from churn customers, again, then you would have 1% of revenue churn here. But they might be different numbers between the customer churn and the revenue churn, because you might lose a small customer or a big customer. So not all customers are equal, really. But when you calculate your churn between customer segments and between the contract length that you have in your customer portfolio, it really tells you the probability of your subscribers canceling their membership or canceling their subscriptions here. Because, for example, maybe your American customers have a higher churn rate, but your German customers are really happy and they have a lower churn rates. And then you can analyze it between different billing frequencies, etc. But this is a key factor to be used in valuations, for example, and net revenue retention calculations, and sales forecasting. So it's really good to calculate churn really analytically and granularly as well. So let's look at the fifth one over here. And so this is lifetime value calculation. We've talked about LTV quite a lot over here, and we've talked about the health of KPI. So what is a good CAC? What is a good LTV? Again, by looking at just LTV doesn't really tell you much, but if you compare it to your CAC, then it actually starts telling you quite a lot. And a healthy LTV to CAC ratio is minimum 3:1. So meaning that you basically earn at least 3 euros from one invested euro in customer acquisition here. And usually the CAC cash flows that you have to pay are upfront, and then the customer pays over time to you on a monthly basis or annually. So the more you can capture those cash flows in the beginning of the customer relationship, the better it is for your cash flow situation. But how to calculate that customer lifetime value? There's a simple calculation. You take the ARPA that you've calculated previously, you multiply it by your gross margin. Most SaaS companies target an 80% gross margin, and then you divide it by your customer churn rate. So I'm going to use my calculator here and give you a really simple example over here. So let's assume that your ARPA is 100 euros a month, so 100 euros of average revenue, and your gross margin is 80%. So you multiply 100 by 0.8, you get to 80, which is on the top of the line. And let's imagine that your churn rate is 2%. So you're dividing that by 0.02, and you're getting 4,000 euros of LTV per customer. So this sounds pretty good. 4,000 euros of expected revenues from a customer. So, but you need to compare it to your CAC. Did you spend 1,000 euros acquiring that customer, or did you spend 3,000 euros acquiring that customer? So think about it in pairs, and think about it in having the same kind of segments for LTV calculation and CAC calculations, that you're comparing apples to apples as well. So that's a small tip for KPI calculation over here. And I'll give the floor back to Kelvin.
Okay, that will be all for now. Thank you guys for joining. Okay, there's another question. Niko, do you think we can take this? We have like 5 minutes, so we are not above time. Let's take this last question then. Is there inherent order in nature, or is it all chaos and chance?
This might be a philosophical question, but then if this is for financial analytics, I would say that financial analytics actually creates order and creates routine and creates forecastability as well. So the more you track these metrics, the more you can actually harness that chaos and reduce the possibility of chance there. The more you analyze, the more you measure, the more you can improve, I would say.